Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach podcast. Today, I have a wonderful return guest for you. Her name is Arlene Miller, and she is an AV rated attorney, a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, a coach facilitator with Ingomu, a national coaching company, and she is the CEO of Julie Consultancy. She works with women seeking work-life harmony and balance. She is also a transformational mentor for men and women, a meditation facilitator, and she was also a business owner and mother for years, and now she's a grandmother. So she has plenty of experience in the work-life balance space and all the other things that we as veterinarians worry about. Welcome back, Arlene. I'm so happy to have you here.
And I'm so grateful to be here again. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I was just listening to our last episode to get prepared for this because I wanted to make sure we covered some more things. And it was episode number 303. So if anybody wants to hear, hasn't listened to 303, and you want to listen more about Arlene, go back to that episode. But today I think we're going to talk, or we're going to start with talking a little bit about storytelling and how that affects us and our brain and how we show up in the world, right, Arlene?
Yeah, I would love to talk about storytelling.
All right,
And
good. Go for it. Tell us all about it.
yeah, it's like when I was in my 20s and even in my teens, especially my 20s as a young businesswoman after I graduated from law school, I didn't really realize all the stories that I was telling myself, and even in law school, to hold myself back of what I could or couldn't do, what my limits were, what my glass ceilings were. I just thought that, oh my God, this is who I am, but it's not true. And
Mm,
so maybe as, veterinarians, I know that I told myself stories in this as an attorney, what I couldn't do originally, a beginning attorney and even as a more seasoned attorney. There could be stories that you're telling yourself about what you can and can't do when it comes to communicating with your people patients, not your animal ones, what you
right.
can and can't do when it comes to dealing with your staff, what you can and cannot do when it comes to, being the best veterinarian that you can be. And one of the first things that we can do with our storytelling is just to choose to be aware, ask the universe, I want to be aware of how I'm talking to myself, and maybe keep like a pen and paper close by when something comes up and you notice, hey, I'm talking to myself and I'm telling myself I'm limited in this way. What do I want to do with that? So that once we are aware of how we're talking to ourselves, once we're aware of the stories that we're telling ourselves that are not serving us, then we can do something about them to reduce their impact in our lives.
Yeah, but the first step is just understanding that you're telling yourself this story in the first place.
That's
And
the
some of them are
awareness.
really deeply buried, right? Some of them we don't
Oh
even
my God.
realize we're telling ourselves. We just think it's a fact.
Right. Oh yeah. I thought all these stories that I was telling myself, a lot of them when I was in my 20s were facts. That men would treat me a certain way or that I could only get so far in the world because I was a woman. There was all sorts of stories I was telling myself um, that just weren't true.
Well, yeah. So how do you get to the point where you're like, okay, it's a fact versus it's a story? Like when I had a story pretty much my whole life that I wasn't a good writer because a teacher in junior high told me that. He said, "You're not a good
Wow.
student, you're not a good writer." He was always on my case in his class. And so I absorbed that and I just believed it like it was a
Yeah.
fact. And it took me a long time to unravel it. So tell us about those kind of stories that you don't even really realize are there.
Yeah, and that's really sad because I think a lot of us do experience that, maybe not as a teacher, but as a parent or a peer group or some
Sure.
organization we're part of, and they tell us things that we can't do and that we're bad at. And I had a
Yes.
friend like that. His first wife told him that he was a horrible singer and couldn't play the guitar, and he ended up really learning the guitar in his 40s. And it was a lot harder than doing it as a kid. And
Sure.
but he had a lot to overcome to say, look, I can do this. This person really wasn't on my side about that. They had their own agenda. And I don't know if there's any magic wand to really know that it's not true, but we can sit back and go, what are the negative stories that I'm telling myself And what if it wasn't true? What would I do differently?
I love that.
How
What
could
if
I,
it
how could I,
wasn't?
what if it wasn't true?
I
What
love
could
that.
I do differently? And what might be my first step here to give it a go?
Yeah, I love that one because, you know, going back to my story as writing, if I would have just sat down and said, well, what if he was wrong? What if I am a good student? What if I am a good writer? And that would kind of blow your mind because you don't believe any of that. You just think it's true, right?
I guess so. I think sometimes we take on certain things and other things we know this is just not true. This guy or this teacher or whatever it is, they just had their head up a dark place and it's their stuff and not
He was
ours.
just a jerk. Now I think that.
Yeah, but sometimes people are very convincing and we allow ourselves to be persuaded. So yes, it's really important just to play that game. What if it wasn't true? And it's really interesting with you. You went to veterinary school. You can't be stupid and go through veterinary school,
Right?
but you just
Right?
kept it isolated to writing, which is really an
Yes.
interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why, other than that that's what he told me. And for some reason I believed it. And it kept me from writing. I didn't write for years and until, I was older and I started saying, hey, I've always wanted to write a book. Why haven't I done that? Well, because you're a terrible writer. But, but what if I wasn't, So I like that
Yeah,
question. What if? What if it
yeah.
isn't true? A lot of us have stories about our bodies for whatever
Hmm.
reason, like we're fat or we're non-athletic or, our hips are too wide or, we have those kind of stories. Um, so just asking yourself, what if it wasn't true? Then what would be true?
Yeah, and really just deciding what do we want to buy into because there's so much of that, looking up and taking a photo and it's like, and if you're older, your body's not going to be perfect anymore. Things are going to
Of
sag,
course.
things, it's not going to be the same ways when we were young. And if we don't love and accept ourselves as we are, it's going to be a different, difficult time.
Well, I see it as these stories keeping us from being the people we want to be or living the life that we want to live.
Right.
Like the other story that I sometimes engaged in was that you couldn't be a good mother if you were working full time. Like I really had to battle that one. And I
Yeah,
luckily, because I wanted to work so badly, I just decided that that wasn't true and that I could be a very good mother for my kids and be, an example of what was possible by working. And
right.
so I know a lot of mothers have that guilt. Did you go through that? Was that one of your stories?
Um, I I guess that's part of the reason I'm a work-life balance and harmony coach for women because
Yeah,
I got pregnant. I opened my own law firm when I was 29 years old after I'd been out in practice for almost 4 years. And little storefront office with a couple of other attorneys and an employment agency. And my ex and I had talked about it because I decided, hey, I'm almost 30. I want to have a kid by the time I'm
right.
30. I'd gone through law school. I had all that stuff in college behind me. And I immediately found out shortly after opening the doors that I was pregnant. All my family was in Kentucky.
Bad
I was living
timing,
in
right?
Ohio. I mean, it was good timing, but it was just like I didn't have the support that I needed. And so I had to build
Right.
my own tribe by myself. And maybe that's what veterinarians have to do as well. Things don't happen in the right and perfect timing with the clients that come in and the animals that come in and the people that work for you in your office. But we sort of have to create our own tribe and support group for ourselves to be able to step forward in a way that we can put those stories to rest.
Yeah. And I agree with you so much that you have to build a tribe. And that can be friends or coworkers or family or coaches or therapists or whoever it takes to change whatever it is that you want to change, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're much better together, than trying to do it alone as a lone wolf. The lone wolf doesn't work so good anymore because then those stories get in our heads and go over and over and over again. If we have a tribe, or just however you said it, other veterinarians, friends, family, support team that we can bounce things off of and get different viewpoints, then we're much more likely to move beyond those kind of stories that just aren't serving us.
Right. And how do you get over the thought that you're the only one that has this story? Like one of my stories was I was fat. And I never really was fat. I was a little chubby when I was, like preteen, and I've always kind of been like a little curvy, like I had bigger hips and thighs than a lot of the other kids or girls. So I turned it into the story that I was fat. How do you get to that point where you can say that out loud and not be ashamed? Because a lot of people they want to keep their stories in because they sound ridiculous, or because if you say you're fat out loud and you're really not fat, then people just think you're being vain or something, right? And your other stories, like you're inadequate or you're not smart enough, or like a lot of people have those insecurities. um and in order to build a tribe, you have to say some of these things out loud, and it's hard.
It is hard. And I guess that's important why you want to have people around you that you can trust. And I
Mm,
guess something that I tell myself all the time is that other people's opinions are none of my business. They're none
mm,
of my business because
that's a great line.
99.9% of the time, it's more about them than it is about me. I'll always consider if someone has a criticism about me and I'll bring it back to myself and go, is this true? And is this something that I need to work with? Or am I being triggered by this person because there's something inside of me that I need to look at? Um, but if there's not, if it's not about me, and I'm choosing not to take this stuff personally, because if it's not about me and what they're saying to me is about them, it's a lot easier not to take stuff personally. I'm going to sort of bring it back to our veterinarians again. If the human clients in there are upset or saying maybe mean or nasty things to veterinarians, your veterinarians, yourself or your veterinarian friends, it's probably not about them. It's probably because they're upset, they're terrified, they're afraid, they're in an urgency moment, and what they're saying is just saying more about who they are, their feelings about their pet, than it is about the veterinarian and what they're doing. And so
Right.
just knowing that, hey, this is not about me. They're in reaction, they're upset. I'm doing the best I can do. How can I take care of this animal and maybe resolve something with the human client later? When we're in those kind of situations. But that I find is really, really helpful.
Yeah. Well, because you have a lot of experience with communicating with clients, negotiating with clients. Um, that's something that you have to do, especially as a business owner and a lawyer. And those situations are, I'm sure, very emotionally charged when somebody's in a situation where they're getting a divorce or they're going to court. That's very scary. And we deal with people in these highly emotional situations in exam rooms. How do you take your brain that tells you you're not good at conflict, or you're afraid of conflict, which a lot of us say we don't like conflict? How do you get yourself out of those situations, or better, into those situations, so you can resolve those conflicts without overreacting or getting so emotionally wrapped up in the situation that you can't handle it, or running from
Yeah.
it because you're afraid? Those are all the things that people tell me they want to do.
Yeah. And I do not like, I'm an attorney. I dealt with conflict all the time. As a commercial lawyer, I was settling claims. I was as a divorce attorney, these are the two things I did. I was
Yeah,
dealing with people at their worst. Um,
sure.
I don't really like conflict at
You don't
all.
like it either.
But what I've learned, and this coaching, and I also have a diploma in transformational holistic counseling from Australia. I can't use it in the US,
Nice.
but it was really helpful, is
Yeah,
that the gift that we can give people is this. Most people, when they're really upset, they don't want you to fix them. They don't necessarily want an answer. Maybe for a vet, they want you to tell them that their pet is going to be okay, and sometimes you can't. But
right.
if you hold a big enough space of that's judgment free, and I call it unconditional positive regard. You're just accepting them where they're at. You're not judging them. You know that they're having a bad time and you're allowing them to share. For many people, that is huge. We don't have to fix other people, but if we give them the opportunity to be heard, that's really helpful. Now, sometimes as a veterinarian, you have to say, I hear that you're upset. I don't know whether your pet is going to live or die. This is what I need to do for them now. I need to have your permission, yes or no, to take this action. Sometimes we have to do that and we can say, I can sit down with you at another time and have a more thorough conversation, maybe over the phone. But right now, we have to do something. If it's a situation where we have the opportunity to listen for 3 or 4 minutes, sometimes that's the best thing that we can do for the human client. Just say, I hear what you're saying. Here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I can do, A, B, C, or D. And we have to
Yeah.
make a decision now.
Here's what I
And so
can do, and here's what I can't do.
right. And we're not trying to change them. I hear that you're upset. I don't blame you. If it was my pet, I would be too.
Right.
Um, but I'm not God. This is what I can do for you.
Right. Yeah, I like that. So if you are in that space, because I know when I go into a space of conflict with a client, especially if it's a all of a sudden thing, like 1 minute
Mhm.
everything's fine and the next minute there's a client yelling at me for, any number of reasons, because that happens. How do
Right.
you get yourself from that immediate like fight or flight reaction? Because the first thing you feel is that adrenaline rush, right? Because your brain is like,
Right.
danger, danger, get out of the room. These people are freaking out, or whatever your brain's saying to you. How do you get to the place where you can be calm to listen and
Well,
not
I
be
think
like defensive?
I think sometimes we have to have really clear, strong, and appropriate boundaries. You
Mm,
might want to say, might want to say time out. It's not
yes.
appropriate. It's not okay to talk to me like this. I'm happy to
Yeah.
do everything I can for your pet, but this is not okay. And it's like being a parent to a child.
Yeah.
Their behavior is inappropriate. You care about them, you care about the pet, but you're not going to
Right.
be a doormat to inappropriate behavior just because they're not hearing what they wanted to hear in that moment. And
Mm,
I think you have to take it in a case by case basis. But if the human client is being abusive, there's nothing wrong with in a very calm manner having clear, strong, and appropriate boundaries. I mean, sometimes we don't even know we're doing that. But I would not be anybody's doormat. If someone's just really, really upset, then the other way is what I just shared with you. I hear that you're really, really upset, and you're not hearing what you want to hear from me. Here are the options. I can't promise you your pet is going to live, but this is the best I can do. Do you want to take your pet away now, or do you want me to do one of these three options?
yeah.
Because
I like
this is
that.
yeah,
Well, because you can say that. Like, I know we think we can't, but you can say you can take your pet somewhere else if you don't want me, but here's what I can offer you, kind of thing. And I
right.
think we're very afraid of that. We're also very afraid of setting that boundary. One of my hard boundaries was not swearing at me or my staff. And so if clients were continually swearing, I would tell them once, I'd be like, you can't swear at me. You can't swear at my people. If you continue, I'm going to hang up the phone. Or if you continue, I'm not going to entertain this conversation anymore. Happy to talk to you or whatever. So I think just knowing what your boundaries are and what you'll accept and won't accept is really important. So you know ahead of time. And then, like you said, having the calm wherewithal to, you know, state the boundary without yelling or I think sometimes if you get in the state of mind where you're getting very defensive, it makes the situation worse.
Right. If we get defensive, it does make the situation worse. And it's not about me. It's not about me. Make it your mantra. It's not about me.
Yes,
And
I
I
love that.
also feel that it's not to be afraid, to be okay to lose a client, because if we have a person that's abusive to our staff and cusses at them and yells at us at a drop of the hat, and we say no and we have clear, strong boundaries and we let them go as a client, we can visualize really kind, wonderful humans coming in with their pets and draw that to us. Because there's a vacancy, now we have time for those kind of people.
Yeah, I like that. I like the vacancy. Let go of a client to make a vacancy for another. That's a really good way to think about it. Because,
Yeah,
we worry about, oh, it's money and that kind of thing. But I will tell you from my own experience that when I have threatened to let clients go, sometimes they've turned into really good clients. When I said,
yeah.
look, you can't act like this. I want to help you. If you continue, I'm going to send you somewhere else. Sometimes that they will come back and apologize. and end up being
Right.
very good clients. And the ones you do let go that are terrible and abusive, you'll never miss them. You'll be so happy you let
No.
them go.
Right. Right. Sometimes people do deserve a second chance because they don't really realize, how they're coming across. They're just so upset and distraught. I have friends that especially the ones that never had children, and their pets are their children.
Yeah,
And so if you're not emotionally mature, if you don't know how to handle death, and a lot of people don't,
right.
it can be they cannot even know how they're coming across. And to have that sort of moment with them where you're like, I really like you, but this behavior is not okay. And if this continues, I'm going to have to refer you elsewhere. That might be like a real shock, it sounds like, to some of those people, not really even knowing how their behavior is affecting other people, including
Yeah.
you and your staff.
Sometimes kind of wakes them up.
Yeah, it's like a wake up
Yeah.
call. It's like, wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I'm so sorry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I had one client that was a real bully and he was a big man and he would come in and he would just push everyone around. And so I had to stand up to him a couple of times and be like, look, I'm happy to see you. And he was very loving with his pets, but he was very demanding. And a couple times I just had to say, look, if you keep acting like this, we're not going to see you anymore. So you're going to have to stop it. And he ended up being a wonderful client for years. He loved us and he loved me. I think mostly because I stood up to him, and he wasn't used to people not backing down when he tried to bully. But I think sometimes if you can just remain calm, but also very resolute in what you'll tolerate and what you won't, that it's
Right, right.
helpful.
Yeah, it's letting go of the fear of losing a client, just knowing that if someone's really that nasty of a client and you're letting them go and for that universe, you're creating these really strong boundaries and you're opening up to people that are really kind who have pets, you're going to attract a more attractive clientele for yourself that you're going to enjoy working with more. Not always,
Yeah.
but there's a much better chance of it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I thought of as we're talking about this, because we talked about storytelling and now we're talking about conflict. A lot of us have a story that we're not good at conflict.
Right.
I'm not good at it. I don't like it. I don't do well in conflict. I get nervous. I get upset. And when I'm coaching people through that, I said, everybody gets nervous in conflict. That's like your normal brain trying to keep you safe. It doesn't want to be in a fight. And that's what conflict feels like, even if it's just an argument or somebody is upset for a silly reason.
Yeah.
But do you see that as a story that we tell ourselves?
Absolutely. And you know what? I told that story to myself and I left family law. Well, I've left family law for a couple of reasons. I started family law right out of law school at 25 with the attorneys that I was working for as a law clerk and then as an associate. And then when I went out on my own, that's primarily what I knew. And then I met someone else who was sending collection law to attorneys, and I started doing that. But there was a lot of attorneys when it was much more male oriented, when I was graduating
Oh,
from
of
law school. There were
course.
about
Yeah,
third,
that men
third
was
female,
too.
two-thirds, two-thirds male, and they
Yeah.
would use their body language and yelling and stuff. And I wasn't raised with that. And there weren't coaches back then. There was
Right.
psychologists and counselors. And so
They
I
just told
didn't
you to
need
suck it
that.
up.
I needed someone to coach me and I didn't really have that. And I didn't know how to handle that. And a lot of the judges, unfortunately, in the jurisdiction I was working, would fall prey to that bullying and cater to them. And so it was like a really kind of dysfunctional, messed up system. Um, and I just decided it was giving me an ulcer, and like I switched to commercial law. And if I had maybe someone to coach me through this, because lots of times people that bully were bullied and abused as kids.
Sure.
That's where they got it from.
Yeah.
And if the judges and other attorneys like myself had stood up to them in a way that had a impact on their law career, it could have made a difference. I just didn't have those skills when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And so I had that experience and I did leave that area of the law and I did go to a more business kind of level law, but there was still emotion in there. You couldn't get away from that as an attorney. But yeah, I raised my hand. I could have done better, but It was the best I could do at the time. And sometimes that's
Well,
just the way it
right.
is for veterinarians. That's the best we can do at the time.
Right, right. I think the lesson though there is that this is a learned skill and a practice skill. Conflict resolution is
Yeah.
something that you can get good at, get better at, um, and then succeed at, rather than just accepting the story that you're not good at it and that,
Yeah.
and you can't do it.
Right. I mean, I know in the law they even have, and I took a course later on about mediation, about how to be a mediator. And you don't have to be an attorney to be a mediator, but you learn all kinds of, it was like a 6-week course through some local bars. And it was a 6-week course through a local organization in Colorado. And I'm sure every state has it because they have mediators everywhere because the judges cannot handle the
Right.
caseload. And you don't have to be an attorney to be a mediator, but those kind of skills that mediators have, if you wanted to take a 6-week course, would be very, very helpful, in the practice as a veterinarian or almost any kind of business um, that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That would be super helpful. Well, that's interesting. Are there other things that we should say about conflict resolution? Because I'm going to change the subject, I think.
I think we've milked it for a lot that it's worth, but
I'm sure there's more. I mean, you and I can
if
both
there,
help people with that.
right, and if one of your veterinarians has a specific question, I know that you put my contact details, underneath there. That's
Yeah.
fine. Just, drop me a line and, if I have the answer, I'm happy to share my best shot with you. Or if I have a recommendation of where to go to from there, I'm happy to give that to you as well.
Do they teach you how to argue in law school?
I did take like moot court and
Okay. Because
was
I
which
always
was
thought it would
prac
be fun to be a lawyer because I kind of enjoy arguing a little bit.
um I think a lot of the law you learn on your feet. We're working
Really.
for another
Kind of
attorney.
like vet med. Same with
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
I mean, you did we did have moot court where we had to argue cases, but it feels a lot different when you're out in the real world
Sure.
and people's livelihoods or people's lives or people's kids or whatever are in the balance of the
In
legal
play.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's different. It feels very different.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is in vet med too. We think we're prepared when we get out of school, but there's a lot of learning on your feet every day.
Yeah,
As many
yeah,
years, at
absolutely.
36 years, I still learn every time I'm in the clinic. So I
Right,
want to talk
right,
briefly to you about, because it's early in the year. I'm not sure exactly what week this podcast will come out, but sometime in January or in February. So we're early in the year. I want to talk about goal setting and dreaming, and because everybody sets New Year's resolutions and they want to do big things in the new year. And then the new year gets away from us and it's the following year, and we didn't do what we said we wanted to do. So, do you have
right.
any insight on that? Like why we
I
do that?
do.
And yeah, tell me
I
about
have a
that.
different way that I recommend doing that. And
Okay,
one way
good.
that we can do is at the end of every day, or if you're too tired, then just pick a time. I like to do it before bed, where you just sort of review your day. What went well, what would I like to do differently, and or what would I like to see differently in my veterinary practice if that's what we're focusing on.
Okay.
And and then, okay, this is what happened, and then you can just take a moment to really visualize and feel what an ideal situation would feel or look like.
Okay.
And then maybe write a few things down. And then when you get up in the morning, like reread your ideal situation. So what you're
Ah,
doing is in the dream state, you're working with it. You're acknowledging that things could have gone better in this one situation. You'd like to experience it a different way. You sort of visualize it and maybe write down a few notes of how that different way would be. You reread it in the morning, and then you're on the lookout for if a similar situation happens again. How did that go? But it's really important if you work like this that you don't judge yourself and you just
yeah,
tell
that's the
yourself,
hard part, right?
okay,
Is letting go of the judgment.
yeah, just tell yourself mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. Mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. I'm choosing to learn and grow from any mistake I make. I'm human. I'm going to make a lot of them. It's just an opportunity to learn and grow.
Right. Yeah. I like that you visualize the ideal way that you would have liked it to go. I sometimes call it shoulda, woulda, coulda. Like I wish I would have done this differently. And but wishing it is different than visualizing it.
Yeah, and you're visualizing how you would have handled it differently
Right.
because we can't
Right.
control anyone but ourselves.
No.
The client, the human client might still have been misbehaving, but how you would have handled that situation differently, not being defensive, holding a strong judgment-free space, knowing that what was going on was their problem and their
Right.
issues and not yours, and
Yeah.
and and being as understanding as you can, and like some of the things we've already outlined.
Right. Right. So then if you have like a bigger goal in mind, like I don't know what's a good one. Let's say you want to run a marathon this year, or you want to, because I work a lot with my coaching clients on these kind of things, or you want to change jobs, or you want to have children, or like some big goal. How do you manage your mind for that so you don't just, let it run you and be afraid and not accomplish what you want to accomplish?
I think the way that we get rid of that anxiety and overwhelm is that every day we do something towards that goal that we can acknowledge. It might be if I'm
Like
going to run a
baby
marathon, is
steps.
yeah, it's like today I acknowledge that I went out, I walked for the first 15 minutes, and then I ran a mile and a half or whatever it was. Or last Sunday I ran 5 miles, and this Sunday I ran 6 miles, and we're because maybe you're increasing your mileage, and you
Right.
acknowledge yourself for that, and you celebrate all the small steps along the way. And what you do is you set yourself up, and you block out time so that you're constantly working a little bit every day on this goal, or at least 5 days a week. If it's running, or whatever it is, if it's something in your business, because if we let it go, that's when the anxiety, that's when the doubt, that's when all those negative feelings come up. If we take little small steps along the way and we're acknowledging our progress, then it's different. And if we're using like the running thing, let's say we go out for a run and we get a cramp and we feel horrible. We don't come back and beat ourselves up. It's like, okay, what happened? How do I need to eat or drink differently so I can
Mm.
take care of my body? Did I not get enough sleep? So that we can say, take a look at how we can take care of ourselves better so that maybe won't happen again.
Yeah, more like problem solving the difficulties rather than just beating yourself up and considering it a failure. Because I think that's what stops
Yeah.
us a lot of times, right? Is we like, well, I said I was going to exercise 5 days a week and I only did 3 this week. And then we give up because we
Well,
consider
that's
it a
another
failure.
point that you make, because if you've never exercised before, maybe you commit to 2 15-minute times a week. We have to give ourselves
Start
reasonable things
slowly.
that we're not going to set ourselves up for failure. I mean, one of
Right.
the things I see people do is especially women, I don't know why we do this to ourselves. We have a to-do list for one day that could take a whole week. No.
I do that almost every day. My to-do list is always way longer than I can accomplish.
So, but if we don't beat ourselves up and we just give ourselves kudos for maybe the top three, if that's going to be our victory, that's different
Right.
than if we beat ourselves up because we didn't do something that wasn't
Yes.
humanly possible, or we didn't give ourselves credit that, look, I've never exercised before. Let's have reasonable goals that I know I can reach, and I can always make them bigger.
Right, right. And then looking for the small successes in that. Because I think sometimes we look for the big success rather than the small baby steps.
And you know what? I don't think there's small steps or baby steps, if because I think that if we do something a little bit every day or 3 times a week or whatever it is, and we consistently do it, we are
Yeah.
going to be, whatever our goal is, we're going to be a totally different person by the end of the year.
Yes, absolutely.
And
You're going to
so
create a new habit,
you're going to create a new person.
right? Yeah.
And and so it's not really small. We just tell ourselves that story, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought of that today is weird because, I'm in that mindset because it's a brand new year, very early in the year. And I was filling up a water glass, getting ready for this podcaster to sit down and coach someone. And I recalled that several years ago, I used to drink Diet Coke like a fish. Like I drank Diet Coke all day long up until the time I went to bed. Like it was such a bad habit. And it's been probably 10 years now or maybe longer, but my son was after me about it. He's like, "Mom, you shouldn't drink that. Mom, that's bad for you." And I decided to stop. Well, I never thought I could stop because I was just so like addicted to the caffeine and the taste of it and the whole 9 yards. And I thought of that today because I would never even think of picking up a Diet Coke now. It's such a habit that I only
Right.
drink water all day. I don't drink any of those flavored drinks. And, once in a while when my kids are here, they get bubbly and I'll drink one of those and I'll be like, I don't know. It's just like I'm so used to water now that just that little bit of a change over a long period of time turns into a habit and
Yeah, it
it's
does.
totally gone. That bad habit of drinking diet pop is gone. And,
Right.
and I think we don't realize the power of that, just
Yeah.
that small goal and turning it into a habit.
And that's a great story about why there's no such thing as a little step. Because
Right.
every day you were practicing that. And I don't know, maybe you had some good days or bad days, but you
Oh, sure.
practiced and you practiced and you practiced and you practiced. And now it's a complete non-issue.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so how
Crazy.
can we say how can we say that those were little steps? Obviously they weren't. And the story you just told is just a great example of how that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why I thought of that today. Maybe I had a premonition that I was going to be talking to you about that. I don't know. Sometimes I have weird thoughts, but that was a thought of mine. I'm like, hey, I haven't had Diet Coke in so many years and I don't even care. Like it doesn't bother me a bit anymore. But at the time, it was a big deal. Like I thought there was
Yeah.
no way. I have to have my Diet Coke or I can't go to work and I can't, get my housework done or whatever the stories I told myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I love that. So, do you have anything else to say about that or managing your mind around your stories or before we start to kind of wind this podcast down? I really enjoy talking to you because I think
Oh,
your life as a lawyer balances so well with veterinarians that work because they're both very
yeah.
hard, very dedicated jobs.
Yeah. Well, the coaching stuff helps too.
Oh,
All of our
sure.
training as a coach.
Absolutely.
I wish I'd gone to that earlier, but maybe I just
It's
wasn't ready,
exactly why I started doing it. When I learned about life coaching, I was like, I have to bring this to the younger people, than me, the people that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s that are struggling with working and children and all the things that I did and didn't have a coach. I was like, man, I would have got so much more done and been so much healthier had I had a life coach back then.
Yeah, and just affirming that, we're not
Yes.
crazy and that it's a difficult thing
Right.
and
That we're just
just to have some
human
more
and this is
support
how it works.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess maybe that's a great way to end for all of your, veterinary clientele and friends who come to your podcasts and you're connected with that. It's just a journey. We're doing the best we can with what we have. We're not perfect. Mistakes
Right.
are opportunities to learn and grow. We can, get a tribe around us to support us. We can tell ourselves more positive things that we've mentioned,
Right.
like mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. And what they're saying says more about them than me. And this is nothing to do with me, so that we're not taking things personally. And then really, go over and over in them, like letting go that your Diet Coke until we really believe them and they're a part of who
Right.
we are, which takes time and
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's so important to realize that you're a normal human. Like, I think so many of us look at other people and think they have it all figured out or their life is so blessed and they have, people have said that to me. They're like, oh, you must have it all figured out because you're a life coach. I'm like, heck no. Like, you struggle every day with the different stories and the things, but you have more tools when
Yeah,
you
we
get
do.
coached and you learn how to coach yourself, but you still are a human with you still make mistakes and you still say the wrong thing. Or I know people that listen to me hear me stumble over my words and know that I make mistakes podcasting a lot. But
Yeah,
it's
and
part of
yeah,
being
and I
human.
think yeah, and I guess when we acknowledge that and we stop beating ourselves up for being human, because maybe we came in here to make mistakes so that we could grow and learn and evolve. If there were no challenges, we wouldn't be growing and evolving. We wouldn't be changing. We wouldn't be able to say, I was used to be doing this, but now it's not an issue. And
Hmm.
so if we look at those things, no matter how difficult they are, as blessings, because this is something that I need to move through to maybe step to the next level of who I am, no matter how challenging it feels in the moment. And I'll put my hand up for that. Um,
Right.
then we have a whole different experience. But it does help to have people around us that can support us in that process.
Yeah, I love that. So tell everyone where they can find you if they want to learn more about you or get coaching with you. I know they can always write to me, but where can they find you?
So my website is Jewel Consultancy,
That's
Jewel, like the diamond consultancy.com. If you're in the US or Canada, you can always text me at 720-936-2634. I get so many emails, so I do prefer texts.
Do
If you
you?
want a quick, I
Okay,
do
that's
because
interesting.
I had get so many emails. It takes me about a half an hour to 45 minutes every day just to get rid of the junk.
It is
And
hard, I know. The text
so
messages are starting to get that way too now.
uh they haven't for me. So let me
Okay, good.
know, you came through me through the veterinary conversation. You have a question. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And yep, happy to chat.
Yeah, well, this was so fun. So anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
Have a happy new year and choose to be kind to yourself.
I love that. That's perfect. We all need to be more kind to ourselves, right?
We do.
So, everybody, this is Arlene Miller, and I really appreciate you being here again today. It was fun to have you back. I enjoy talking to you. It goes by really fast when we're in here. And have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye. Bye, Arlene.